Welcome, viewers. Today, we are delighted to have Ambassador William Milam with us. And we're going to talk about some politics, some history, and some international relations with him. Ambassador Milam had a long and distinguished career in the international diplomacy, especially in South Asia. He has been the U.S. Ambassador to Bangladesh and also the U.S. Ambassador to Pakistan. He was in Bangladesh during a very turbulent period of our history. Soon after he took office, he saw the military dictator Hussein Mahmud Ershad deposed by public protests. It gives us a great opportunity to compare and contrast between the events that took place 35 years ago and the events that took place just a few months ago. So this gives us a unique opportunity to talk to an individual who had a front row seat about what was happening in Bangladesh 35 years ago. Ambassador Milam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I'm very happy to be here because I've had a wonderful time here so far. And it's very nice to close it off, which is almost finished, with a nice television interview.
You've been here from 1990, right, to 1993?
Yes, 1993.
So you had the front row seat to our turbulent period of our history?
Well, it was almost involved. It's more than the front row seat. I was actually on the stage a couple of times, I think. I mean, that's his metaphor, of course. This isn't reality. I wasn't involved, but I got very close to a whole lot of things. I had a number of conversations with the dictator who was being overthrown and so forth and so on. So it was a very interesting time, very exciting time, and I remember it very clearly.
Sir, in the first few months of your tenure, you actually met 3 different heads of state, right, in Bangladesh?
I guess so, yes. There was Ershad and there was Shahabuddin and Begum Zia. Yeah.
Do you have any memories of your interaction with them?
I certainly remember my interaction with all of them in one way or another. I saw Ershad several times before he was overthrown, before he left office. And we talked, and he was trying to encourage me to do some things that I didn't want to do, so I didn't do them. But it was so I had interactions with him, and I had, of course, met him early on when I first arrived in the kind of way that an ambassador meets a head of state, and I'd been at dinner with him a time or two. And there were some American visitors there at the time, and I remember being with them and him at one point. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really get to know Ershad very well until later on. But anyway, yes. And then I think I told you that I had the pleasure of carrying a message to him and some money that we owed him early on after he was after the government that Caretaker government took over, and he was a very, very good man, very great man, I think. So he was a good one to know. And then later on, I think I told you that I had to call him once when my house was likely to be attacked. This was quite a long time afterwards. But anyway, so he came right to the rescue. So it was great.
Okay, that's a fascinating story behind it, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm sure.
Bangladesh back then was going through a lot of political turmoil when you were here. And
yes.
What was the mood like, especially after the fall of
let me just describe the day after Ershad fell, or his falling was announced. We were, the Chief Justice President called all the diplomatic corps to come in because they wanted to make the announcement that he had left office and that he had taken over. And so we drove downtown in my car. I rode in the embassy car, the ambassador's car downtown, and there were all my fellow ambassadors were on the road racing along and so forth. But what I remember most was that when we got to the big square in front of where the president lived, there were thousands, maybe 10 or 15 or 25,000 people. And they were all about 25 years old. They were all young, and they were excited and shouting great things, and they were very happy that Ershad had fallen and so forth. And it was such a happy scene that it sticks in my memory and it will stick in my memory until I'm gone. I think it's just was really astonishing.
From your diplomatic perspective, when Bangladesh was transitioning from autocracy to democracy, you were there for the first 2 years, right? 1991.
I was there until 1993. Yes, yeah.
So very hopeful in the beginning.
Well, at the beginning, we were very hopeful. And I've written about this in a book I wrote on it, but because we slowly but surely learned that some of the elements of democracy were not yet part of the mindset of your political leaders, of the political leaders. They still were back in the days of antagonism with each other. And I think I said this earlier, that defeat in an election was next to death, maybe worse than death. So they did everything they could, including all kinds of dirty tricks, to avoid it.
So there were some signs. You thought that if something goes wrong, it might be because they couldn't trust each other, or they thought the stakes were that high that they just couldn't live by losing an election.
Well, I think, I don't know exactly how to explain it, except that they didn't feel they could afford to lose an election, and that it was kind of like a feeling of death. I didn't mean they would die, nor did I mean they would be killed, but I meant that they felt like they had died if they lost the election, and it was then very important in their minds to stay in office, and they used any means possible to stay there.
So back then,
but I want to go say that it developed over time. So I think the first year and the second year it sort of got worse and worse, and then the third year was even worse. And then, as you know, I left by then, but I know the history. And it got worse and worse as they go towards the following election in 1996. So
I think back then we were more concerned about how to do fair elections, but we didn't talk much about political reforms back then.
That may be the case, yes. I'm not quite sure what you were concerned about, what they were concerned about, but it wasn't free and fair elections, and it wasn't really democracy. That was really the point. It wasn't really democracy.
It's basically like an election, and who wins.
Well, an election meant you could govern and reap the rewards thereof, but it doesn't mean that you would govern as a Democrat and turn over power peacefully. And I think there's the problem, that turning over power peacefully was a very difficult thing.
The first interim administration of Justice Shahabuddin Ahmed laid down the template for the caretaker government system.
I would have thought so, yes.
Do you think it was a very interesting political innovation? Because I don't think we saw that anywhere else in the world.
I don't know if we saw it anywhere else in the world. I didn't know of it being used anywhere else in the world. But I think it worked very well. And the proof in the pudding is that when the Awami League started to undo it, which came a number of years later, they undid the caretaker amendment first in order to make sure that there would not be a caretaker government to run elections. So then, therefore, the party in power can run the election, and the party in power can cheat as much as they can to try and win.
Sir, this time around,
yes.
So the focus should not only be on election; it should be more on political reform.
Well, that's one conclusion you can make. It's the conclusion you've just made, and it's one that's hard to counter. The focus should be on democracy, on how it is, and on instilling a democratic feeling within the body politic. Really, I mean, it's not just the politicians that have to believe in democracy. It's the people that have to believe in it. Therefore, and then the people will hold the politicians accountable for what they do. And if the politicians mess up, they're out. But it's a democratic way of getting rid of your bad leadership.
What's your take on the current administration governed by headed by Professor Muhammad Yunus?
Well, that's a very, very difficult, easy question for me, because I've known Muhammad Yunus for 30 years. I met him when I was in Bangladesh back in those days. I got to know him quite well. I remember that in those days he was more troubled by the fact that some economists didn't believe in microcredit, in the effectiveness of microcredit, which I believed in because I thought it would work, and it did. It did. It worked, and it's become one of the ways you help the poorest of the poor. So, I can't say anything about Muhammad Yunus except that he's a great man, and I know he wants to a great outcome for what the situation Bangladesh has in front of it. The choosing of parties, the elections, and so forth. I've talked to him along with my colleagues on this visit. And we were all extremely impressed with his ideas and the way he was going. So I can't say anything. I can't say anything bad about it because there's nothing bad to say.
What would you say if this government fails to do sufficient reforms? Let's put it this way, or goes for an early election? Would you be happy personally?
Well, I don't know. I haven't made up my mind. I'm not conversant enough with all the facts to have a really hard and firm opinion on some of the details. So, should the election be early? Should it be later? I'm not sure. If Muhammad Yunus says he wants an early election, and I don't think he's made it clear yet. But whatever he says looks to me to be the best solution.
What would they need to do so that you'll say, okay, they're successful in doing what they needed to do?
Well, they need to have a successful election, and they need to have a government that is not going to be like the former government,
right.
that has learned the lessons of democracy and will practice it. That means that some of the reforms that they're thinking of have to be not only installed but followed carefully and fastidiously.
In the end, the challenge is always to make political parties play by the rules, right?
Well, that's certainly the challenge for democracies, yeah.
So one part is doing the reform. And is there anything else that we can do, possibly, in your opinion?
Well, I think I've sort of run the gamut, haven't I? I mean, you've got to have a decent election. You've got to elect a party or parties that believe in democracy and are willing to make the reforms necessary to sustain it. And we won't know any of that until we get to that point, and then we'll know whether they're doing it or not.
You met the young student leaders?
Yes, I did indeed.
What's your observation?
I was very impressed with them. They are very smart. They're very well educated. They seem to have the right mindset, and they also seem to be very calm. And I didn't find any particular parts of what they said to be offensive in any way, or that I thought were not meant to be part of a sustainable democratic outlook.
Are you confident about a better democratic Bangladesh than you were, say, 35 years ago? How would you compare with that?
Well, we never got to anywhere near this point 35 years ago. So I'm hopeful now that we will get to this point and past it.
There's another significant challenge, I think, is coming up next. Whoever comes to power, this is after many years, Bangladesh is going to get someone in power who has no prior experience of running the matters of the state.
Yes.
So, do you think that will be a problem?
I don't see why it should. On the surface, it shouldn't. I mean, if the person who's elected is a Democrat, small d, which means he believes in democracy, not that he belongs to the Democratic Party. If the person and the person is willing to entertain the suggestions for reform that have been made that look like they should be made, then I see no reason why it won't work.
With the exception of these internal issues, Bangladesh is also going to face some external problems as well, right? In the
well, I don't know. That may be true. I'm not sure. I mean,
just to give an idea that there will be something called the new Cold War.
Oh well, you're starting a war before it even surfaces. I don't know. I don't know that there's going to be a new Cold War. You know, maybe there will.
Okay.
But that's the scale on which that is quite different than we're talking about with an election here in Bangladesh. Right. I mean, we're talking about war between China and the U.S. or China or Russia and the U.S. or Russia and Ukraine or whatever. That's very different indeed. Right. And I don't know where those issues are going, but I do know that you can promote a democracy here in Bangladesh. You can make a democracy here in Bangladesh. No matter whether there's a Cold War or not, if you're bound to do it, if you want to do it, if you have the people and the moxie to do it.
There's also an very assertive neighbor, India. And
yes,
unstable one.
Well, I know of the issues with India. I'm hoping the Indians come to their senses and back off a little bit, because I think I know a little bit about international affairs, and I don't see that the way they're on now is in any way in their real interests. So I think there's lots of room for movement on the Indian part, and there maybe I don't know exactly what needs to be done to encourage that, but the Indian experts or the experts on India, let me put it that way,
okay.
Probably don't.
One last question.
Sure.
So, given all that, the global scenario,
sure,
the internal issues.
Well, I'm sorry it's the last question because I'm having fun.
What would be your advice to the next government, next political leaders, next generation of political leaders, or general people?
When I see them, if I'm still around, I will say, do it. Get in there and make a democracy that works. And that's my advice. Mm-hmm. And they can do it. There's all kinds of signs to me that Bangladesh is ready for democracy. It can do it. It needs leadership, and it needs some reforms on the political side that move leadership, and that leadership can use to do that. But there's no reason why you won't have a democracy if you do it right. And I will say, do it right.
Thank you, Ambassador Milam.
Well, you're quite welcome. I'm happy to be here. I'm sorry we're ending so soon.